I would go and jump into my pool, and it just happened to be wintertime. And the pool I had was a saltwater pool, so it got really cold in the wintertime. And then I'd hop out, dry off, put on my gi, go to jiu-jitsu. I noticed after about a week and a half or 2 weeks of going in the pool and being cold in the wintertime and then going to jiu-jitsu, my muscles were like dense again. And I had vascularity in my arms, and I was losing weight quick. Went to my doctor and drew my labs, and he's like, come on, dude, what are you taking? Done, I got the results back. I sent you a snapshot. I think it was 771.
It's pretty healthy for a guy with one testicle. How was your plunge?
It was cold.
That's a compliment.
It was wonderful.
You do a lot of cold, though. You're used to the cold.
I frequent the cold water, yes, sir, and the moving water in there, the pump circulating the water around you it makes it another level of mindfulness of what exactly you're doing. You still get the escape, you still get the release, you still get the initial shock jolt, and then obviously the curve kind of going downward and flattening out, but I think it takes longer, and that makes you be more present in the moment. Just doesn't let you go like, I'm in the ice, breathe, okay, now I'm here, what time is it, because sometimes you're cramming it into a day full of other things that you need to do. I mean, everybody can appreciate making and finding time for yourself, and that's exactly what that is.
You have been posting a little bit on grounding, the benefits of grounding, and I know that you've used cold plunges that are not grounded, and you've been in Morozko that is grounded. But can you really tell?
Oh yeah, I think overwhelmingly, and just based off of the popularity of the Morozko sitting next to a non-grounded competition plunge, if you would, in the marketplace, people gravitate towards that one because of the feeling that you get while you're sitting in it. There's something different about, and I'm sure it's the depolarization of your entire body's intrinsic system as you're sitting in there, allowing yourself to then discharge any of that, proxy energy that's built up within you, much like a static charge would be, like dragging your feet on the carpet. When you sit in that water, that fantastic conductor of electricity, and now it is directly plumbed into the metal tub that you're on. I mean, it's contact to contact, and the amount of release, if you will, that you get while you're just sitting in there is much different to the acrylic, because I mean, you're sitting in synthetics.
Okay, so there's the release and there is the electrical rebalancing with the earth. What does that feel like, or how? Because there's so much going on when you get into the cold water. You're having the sympathetic nervous system activation, you're getting some of that fight or flight. How would you differentiate the feeling of grounding from everything else that's happening?
It feels like quiet. If you've ever been in the woods, if you've ever been in a place that's peaceful, if you've ever been somewhere where there's not a lot of noise, there's no background, that's what it feels like. If I can translate that feeling into a sound, if you would, it's the absence of. There's no feeling, which obviously doesn't answer the question, and I'm not trying to dance around it because it's hard to describe. When you sit in there and you have this kind of catharsis, like it just stops, whatever it is, and clearly when you get out and start moving around again, you can feel the energy build back up. It's not like you're just in flux moving from one to another. Like you get out of there and you can feel like your system's like rebooting, turning back on slowly. It feels like quiet, feels like peace. You go into the woods, it's quiet, and you're like, oh man. The only thing I can hear is the birds or the crickets or the creek running through. It's similar to that. There's an absence of the extra.
I think you posted that Morozko was the second best thing to nature.
Yeah.
I think you had us in the right position. Because get in the ocean, go to the beach,
right.
Get into the river, go to the mountains, get into the streams. There's really no substitute for being in nature. The next best thing, if you're in Tulare, if you're in Visalia, if you're in Phoenix, and the ocean, the forest is a long way away, then you have to bring some of that. We're using the machine to bring some of those benefits to us where we live and work.
Right, and I mean, you could live in a teepee or you could live in a house. And there's comforts associated with both, and there's convenience associated with one versus the other. But I have to get in my car, I have to pack my kids up, I got to pack towels and snacks and water and things like that, and I got to drive up to the mountains, which luckily for me, I live in an area that's right at the base of the Sequoias, 30 minutes up, jump in the Kauai River, and that, to me, is heaven. Or going to the beach and getting your feet in the sand and the sun. Heaven. That's number one. Mother Earth is clearly in control of everything and anything, but second best to that. And being in different brands, obviously won't state what they are, but I've tried a whole bunch, including like ones that have been built at home and deep freezers and competitors of Morozko. I cannot quantify the difference. It is leaps and bounds above the competition in every way, shape, and form.
Brian Hoyer from Shielded Healing, he quantified the difference. He measured the current that you can discharge through a Morozko and found that it was 30 times more grounded. That is, it will ground you 30 times faster than walking barefoot in the grass.
Clearly,
that's pretty impressive.
You're putting a majority of your, instead of just the soles of your feet, you're putting a majority of bare skin against a conductor that's grounded through a conductor. I mean, it makes complete sense.
What Brian didn't do is say, okay, now you're grounded. What difference does that make? But Jessica Genetics, she runs a shampoo company called Fountainhead in St. George, Utah. She's also a scientist. So she measured her blood. She put it in the microscope. She said, this is the state of my red blood cells. Took a picture.
Okay.
Then she went outside. She grounded herself barefoot in the grass, spent a half an hour, came back in, pricked her finger again. This is the state of my blood cells when they're after grounding. And grounding is known to reduce blood viscosity and improve blood flow. But she illustrated it on these slides. You could see how the red blood cells were disaggregated. They have less tendency to coagulate, which means fewer clots, better blood flow, lower risk of a cardiovascular event. This is what happens when you are grounded, and it doesn't matter how old you are. You can be a kid and you can be out of electrical balance. The risk endpoints change, but the condition of your blood and its viscosity when you're not grounded is less flow, that is less circulation through your body. So if you are working on an injury, or if you are working on reducing your risk of a stroke or a blood clot, some people are taking blood thinners, you might be missing a non-medicinal therapy if you're not looking at grounding.
Yeah, totally. And people with thrombocytopenia and other types of pre-existing medical conditions could benefit so much from something so simple. It's always the little dumb things that we miss, the things that you would never think of. My professor in jiu-jitsu, Mark Dillacruz, out of Vitruvian Martial Arts, he's amazing. And he'll be like, no, your hand needs to be this way. And that's the difference between getting a submission and not in live rolls or competition, is just turning your hand the other way. It can be something so dumb that you didn't see. It could be something so simple as climbing into something that is going to ground you. Or, and I'm sure that just the grounding effect of her barefoot on the earth and reducing the viscosity of the blood and reducing the platelet aggregation, as you describe on the microscope slides. But I wonder, and I'm curious, what would someone's blood look like before and after, getting in a Morozko and sitting in there through the 30 times increase in the ability for your body to discharge.
We haven't done those slides yet.
And I'm sure there's a point of diminishing return, to where you can only discharge so much because your body only has so much potential to do so. But with that, did we just shave off 27 minutes of standing out barefoot in the grass and do it in 3 for a similar or maybe even better result?
It's so fast, I'm guessing that it's practically instantaneous.
Well, it'd be like comparing it to opium poppy sap and morphine that's been synthesized. They're the same thing.
It's not the comparison that came to mind for
me. But one is much more stronger and potentiated for a very specific use. And they're both for relieving pain. And they're both going to work essentially. But what you've done is through science created something, medicine now, to very focused and purposefully get you an end result. But that's what comes to mind with me is like, okay, you have this raw thing. You have Mother Earth's grounding, barefoot, walking around. And yeah, when we were native or without shoes and insulated feet, we're walking around all day long barefoot. So we're going to get
Wasn't
that
a problem.
stuff. It didn't exist.
We were in the water all the time.
But now we got
our ancestors.
We got Nikes and Birkenstocks and all these other things that are going on. And well, we need to improve or increase the speed of being able to discharge our potential energy that is creating, you know, all these other types of issues because we're not one in tune back with nature. And we talked about this yesterday about how much money we're using on managed care in the healthcare industry, when it could be something as simple as, hey, go outside and stand in your grass and get a little sunburn.
90% of our healthcare expenditures in the United States go to management of chronic illness. It's not an ER visit. It's not the crash scenes that you show up on. You're in the 10%. 90% is for type 2 diabetes, for rheumatoid arthritis, for persistent migraine headaches, for autoimmune disorders, for things that the medical establishment will tell you are unmanageable without drugs and incurable.
Well, that sounds like what somebody would want to sell you drugs would say.
Yep.
Take this,
pretty freaking
continue to pay me.
convenient,
Yeah, in the complex that we've created to propagate this machine, which is the medical industrial complex.
The fact is, type 2 diabetes is reversible. Hashimoto's thyroiditis, you can resolve that. Rheumatoid arthritis, manageable. Although there's no cure for type 1 diabetes, and there's no cure for a number of autoimmune disorders, there are a number of things you can do to slow the progression of Parkinson's or to manage multiple sclerosis flare-ups, for example. And none of the 17 FDA-approved MS medications offer you a cure either. So you might as well get in the cold water and feel great.
And, you know, one thing you didn't touch on, which is near and dear to me, is hypogonadism.
Tell me about that.
I injured myself in 2007 at work in a training exercise, wearing a full body harness. Fell 20, 30 feet or so, and the harness, the belay attached to the pelvis caught me, and it ended up crushing my left leg, pudendal nerve, and then also my genitalia, specifically my left testicle, was damaged very badly, and I ended up getting compartment syndrome in my scrotum, which is swelling without resolve, or they thought it was compartment syndrome. I never got diagnosed, but the doctor later on was like, I bet you had that based off these pretty gnarly photographs. I ended up becoming hypogonadic from that traumatic insult to
Will you explain what hypogonadism is? That
is when your body doesn't produce as much or any testosterone. And people that have had like testicular cancer or, for example, I mean, and I hate to compare myself to it, but if you have a male dog that is just too aggressive and, you know, peeing on things, what do? We take them to the vet and we neuter them. That's removing their testicles. We remove that sex hormone that naturally makes males male. Mm-hmm. You know, you get the changes in our body composition, facial hair, aggressiveness, all of these other things, sexual drive. I was super low. My lab values were initially like sub 200, mm-hmm. which is almost undetectable.
Mm-hmm. In men, yeah.
In men, yeah. And as far as, you know, for that test, and so they started experimenting with, you know, trying to give me supplementation, whether it was creams or deodorant. I never got the pills. They wanted to insert these pellets. And I was like, it seems a little permanent. Tried injectable testosterone, and it just did not. We didn't mix well. I didn't like that drug. It didn't treat me well. It made me sick. It gave me cholestasis. I ended up having when my liver panel was off the chart. My hematocrit was way high. I'm thickening of the blood, and any adverse circumstance you could have with sex hormone supplementation happened to me. Just bad luck, I suppose, or maybe good luck. And I ended up getting off.
Maybe there were a lot of things going on with you at the time,
perhaps,
too. Yeah,
the stress and work and a lot of other co-compounding factors. I ended up getting off of it cold turkey, like we spoke about. I just took the stuff and threw it in the trash. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's the right way to dispose of that controlled substance, but mm-hmm. that's what I did. I threw it away and got it away from me, and suffered for a little while. It was no fun, depression, and not in the sense of like where like suicidal ideation or anything like that, but I just didn't have any drive to do anything. I don't want to do anything. I just want to sit around and take naps and really, I got to go to work, and I just forced myself to go through the motions. And I fell into this like beautiful accident is what I like to call it, because I started doing jiu-jitsu to try and like motivate me to do some other things, and there were some other things going on in my life that drove me towards jiu-jitsu to try and like have some of what we talked about, that like escapism. Give me this temporary 1 hour for myself, and I don't have to think about anything else when I put on the gi and tie the belt and go on the mats. Like for this 1 hour, it's mine, and I don't have to think about paying the bills or going to work or going to the kids' soccer practice. This is for me. Well, I wasn't very good at it, like most people aren't when they start something new. But I really, really wasn't good at it. And even my coach, my professor Mark, says it all the time. Anytime he gives me a stripe or promotes me in a belt, he's like, this was the worst white belt I ever had. Like, it took me almost 4 years to get a blue belt, which is a long time, because I sucked, and I still suck, I guess. I think we always suck at jiu-jitsu, us that do it. We always think we suck, even if we are maybe decent at it. But with that being said, I was so sore because I was getting my butt kicked really bad all the time. I would go and jump into my pool, and it just happened to be wintertime. And the pool I had was a saltwater pool, so it got really cold in the wintertime, and it wasn't heated, obviously. And I would jump in there, and I'd thrash around and like move my arm that was hurt really bad, and I'd just go in there for a couple minutes and kind of get numb. And then I'd hop out, dry off, put on my gi or my gi bottom, and grab my bag and go to jiu-jitsu. And as embarrassing as it is talking about my genitalia and crushing them and all these other things, I noticed after about a week and a half or 2 weeks of going in the pool and being cold in the wintertime and then going to jiu-jitsu, it was all by total accident because I was so sore, and I don't want to take Tylenol or Advil every day and get an ulcer or mess up my liver. I'm very much, because of my wonderful mother, believe in more holistic approaches to things. And anyway, where I'm going with this was I started waking up in the morning with erections. And I was like, what the fuck?
That's not consistent with low testosterone.
No, I'm like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Like, I'm like 18 again? Like, what's happening? And then I noticed, maybe like a couple days or another week later, like my muscles were like dense again. And I had vascularity in my arms, and I was losing weight quick because I'd put on a lot of weight. I was up to about 206 pounds. That was heavy for my frame. I'm 5'8", I weigh like 176 now. And I was chubby, and I was sluggish, and I was slow, and now all of a sudden I'm waking up with a boner, and I have veins in my arms, and I'm ready to go, and I want to flip shit over. Like I'm like, what is going on here? Went to my doctor and drew my labs, and he's like, come on, dude, what are you taking? Did you drive down to Tijuana and get some little protein in a vial? I'm like, no, dude. Like, he's like, well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. And then
do you remember the numbers?
I'd have to try. He moved back to Canada. He's a great doctor. But I know I was really low in 200. I want to say it was like in the fives or 6s,
which
or
most
something.
Doctors would say, oh, that's normal.
But for me, it was a huge contrast between what it was. And he's like, what are you doing? He thought I was taking, it was back on the sauce. And I was like, no. Then the seasons changed. The pool heated up. I kind of started going back down. I'm like, what is going on? So then I got, a trash can from work. It wasn't a trash can. It was like this blue empty barrels, and they had a bunch of them. And I asked somebody, I'm like, what are these for? And they're like, yeah, you can use them. I sawed the top off of this barrel and rinsed it out really good because I don't know what was in there. Hopefully it wasn't bad. But started filling it up with ice and sitting in it at work. And then I'd go work out and drag fire hose or put on my air pack. And I was just totally experimenting, like seeing like if I could do breathing exercises in the ice and see how long I could make my air cylinder last on a self-contained breathing apparatus. And so then I, got this little ice barrel, and I was getting the ice from the firehouse and doing it at home as much as I could. But ice is expensive, and moving it back and forth in Yeti coolers to the truck, and people. And then it's summertime, and then the firefighter's like, "Hey, dude, there's no ice," and everybody,
Captain used it all,
stealing all the ice, and they can't fill up the ice chest, and it's 109 outside, and we can't keep our Gatorades cold for rehab after a structure fire. And I get it, But what ended up happening wasn't just me taking the ice. Like, other guys started doing this too, because they started being like, what are you doing? I'm curious. What's this about? And I'm like, man, I don't know what it is. Like, when I do this, I feel fucking alive. Like it turned something back on in me that was broken. And anyway, so other guys started stealing the ice too. And then it turned into this whole debacle, and no more ice baths at the station. And they're working on trying to get them back and figure out how to go about it the best way with, a managed approach to the human resource concerns and other things that go on in municipalities. But every fire department, every police department, every paramedic, EMT, private company should be investing in their employees' health. And if all they need to do is sit in a bucket of ice to make them feel better, whether it's PTSD resolution, hormone mitigation, mitochondrial reset, cancer reduction, they should be looking at buying a bigger ice machine and a bigger tub or whatever it is that they can sit in to fix them, whether it's a Morozko or anything of the like put people in cold water. Clearly, we're here talking to you today because Morozko, in my experience and my experimentation, as anecdotal and juvenile as it may be in the scientific method, and it's clearly subjective, in my opinion, that this is the best one on the market. My testosterone resolved, though, and it's still good. I had it drawn the other day. We talked about the NFPA physicals because we were talking about an agency here in Arizona that prohibits the practice, similar to the department that I work for. Doesn't really prohibit it, it's just not sanctioned, and you shouldn't be doing it on duty, so people avoid it because they don't want to get into trouble, right? It's still kind of on the fringe. With that versus a clear prohibition and policy to not do it, I think is a little wild. But again, I don't work for that agency. I'm not in the management or leadership of that agency to speak, to not have their arguments on the contrary.
Does the NFPA physical measure your testosterone levels?
No. I paid the company. We have a company that comes every year and does our NFPA physicals. I gave them it was like $50 to add it onto the lab value because I wanted to see where I was at. And I just got it done. I got the results back. I sent you a snapshot. I think it was 771.
It's pretty healthy for a guy with one testicle. I mean, I don't know how your left one's doing and whether
he's hanging around.
Back. All right. Right.
I don't think it works very much, but
right.
Yeah, he's just floating around. But true story. I injured myself really bad. My body doesn't produce as much natural testosterone, and there could have been some other cooks in the kitchen, to be fair. But clearly the lab values, and I wasn't any more wildly stressed out than I think I am today. I might be a little bit calmer. There's some other things going on, but not enough to make your testosterone completely turn off.
If you Google ice bath testosterone, Google's AI summary overview engine will tell you there is no evidence that ice baths can be used to increase testosterone. What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, if you look up laptop on my lap testosterone low, it'll tell you don't put heat on your testicles. I mean, my doctor told me, hey, you want to keep your testosterone high? Obviously, I don't like allopathy. It's not my favorite thing, but I still go and get physicals, and there are some laboratory values that are important to me, like a calcium score for my heart, waking up at night to tones and having that shock value to my vascular system having to go from 0 to 100 really quick.
Because it's your job.
Because it's my job, so I get a calcium cardiac scan once every 3 years, once every 5 years or so, because it does require radiation. But with that, I still go to my doctor, and he goes, and he's good. His name's Dr. Miyakawa. He's old. I don't want to say old. He's old school. He's obviously older than me, but with that being said, he's like, hey, you want to keep your testosterone up? Stay out of the sauna. He's all, maybe once or twice a week if you really enjoy it, because I'm telling you, man, he's all, the cold is working for you clearly, and he believes my story, and I've showed him the evidence, which I've shared with you, and he goes, hey, but you want to keep your levels really high? Like, don't be heating up the boys. So I would say, to answer your question, if hot is bad and lowers your testosterone production, why wouldn't, coincidentally, cold be good? Or at least not bad. At the minimum. Maybe it doesn't make a huge effect right away, but I would say consistent cooling is going to increase with all of the other components of the global mild hypothermia and the parasympathetic reset and having the vagal tone changes and all of the other like associated benefits with deliberate cold water exposure probably are all compounding into a healthy level of sex hormone in the male and female.
The funny thing about Google is it'll give you that AI overview saying there's no evidence that ice baths increase testosterone. But the number one search result that it delivers is our article, How to Use Ice Baths to Increase Your Testosterone. I've got maybe a dozen people who have sent me their labs saying, I started doing ice baths, this is what happened to my testosterone. We've got the Sakamoto study from 1991, which I know that you're aware of, because they changed the order. They did the ice baths after the exercise, and it reduced testosterone. And everybody thinks, oh, well, that's the final word. But when Sakamoto reversed it and did the ice baths, it was just cold stimulation. It was the forearm. They didn't even get in the whole bath. Then they did 20 minutes on the exercise bike. Luteinizing hormone and total testosterone in men went up. The order of things really matters. Of course, you can use ice baths to increase your testosterone. You can also use ice baths to decrease your testosterone. It depends in men on whether you do the exercise after the ice bath or beforehand. But in women, it's really interesting. It's instant. They took the cold pressor test. It's just one hand, usually non-dominant hand, in a bowl of ice water. So they took men and women and wanted to compare how they reacted to pain. Mm-hmm. So they created the pain using the cold pressor test, and then they measured all kinds of things, including salivary testosterone. In men, cold pressure, cold stimulation, just like we would expect, reduced salivary testosterone. But in women, salivary testosterone went up, and right away. There are physiological differences between men and women, of course, and testosterone is one of the big ones. In men, the testosterone is produced in the testes, but in women, they have so much less testosterone than men, about a tenth, just generally speaking. Well, it's not all made in the ovaries. Only about a quarter of women, or of the total testosterone in a woman's body, is made in the ovaries. It's also made in the skin, in the fat cells, and in the adrenal glands. Now in men, these contributions are insignificant compared to what's made in the testes. But in women, a significant portion of their total body testosterone is made in the skin, the adrenal glands, and the fat cells. What do you suppose would stimulate the skin, the adrenal glands, and the fat cells better than anything?
Cold water, right? Activation of brown fat.
You got it.
And I wonder if some of that proxy fight or flight taps into the dangerous mama bear.
It would make sense.
Yeah, I need to get aggressive really quick.
You get a rush of these adrenals, and it would make sense if testosterone is one of the things that happens in a woman's body when that sympathetic nervous system fight or flight is activated, and it is instantaneous. But for a long time, I hadn't heard from any woman who said, you know, I used ice baths to elevate my testosterone, until I got a call from Pamela Butler. And she said, I'm in kind of a special situation. I'm 60 years old, but I was surgically menopausal. I've been menopausal since I had a hysterectomy, right, for decades. Then I had to have my ovaries out. And of course, I've been on testosterone cream because that takes a lot of my testosterone out, and I feel better. There are no FDA-approved protocols for treating women with low testosterone. So a clinician has to adapt a male protocol and try to kind of figure it out. And it's probably easier for a woman who no longer has a cycle, because a clinician can get sort of a reliable dosage and say, we're going to keep you in this range. And that's where Pamela Butler was until she started doing ice baths. And then no exercise, just the ice baths. Her T levels shot up by a factor of 10. She went from 16 to like 164 nanograms per deciliter total testosterone. She took these results back to her clinician, and of course, they're like, no more cream for you.
Right.
But Pamela feels great. Some women are like, well, doesn't she have a mustache or something? No, she looks great. She feels great. She's got a lot of energy. Her libido is doing great. She's gonna try it without the cream. But the testosterone gives you so much motivation, whether you're male or female, so much drive for life, that a lot of people who have recovered from low T, they don't want to take any chances that they might
it's terrible.
Sort of go back to that place.
I've been there. I've lived it. And I understand that hesitation. I don't want to get off it. I'm not willing to gamble, and I don't ever want to be back there again. So what do? Some people think it's crazy, and that's okay, but I feel great. I'm going to go sit in cold water as often as I can, cold enough to scare me and long enough to shiver. And then I'm going to get out. And then I'm going to go
like
about
the right
my
way
day.
to do it.
That's exactly what I do. And we talked briefly about this. I've had a couple firefighters over, and we'll put weights out on the grass in the sunshine, and we will do cycles through the cold water on a circuit. And that's our recovery round. So you go in the water for a minute, minute and a half, and try and catch your breath after, a 60-second dead ass sprint on an air bike, or on an echo bike, or one of the Schwinn's that I have. And then, kettlebell swings, or we're doing squat thrusters, or something that is all compound movements with the exception of the bike. I mean, it's still kind of compound. You're moving your arms on an air bike, but then you have to recover in the cold. And we'll do that for 5 or 10 cycles, and it is just the most... And I don't do CrossFit. I've done it a couple times. It was extremely difficult. I'd rather fight people in pajamas for my workout. That's my jiu-jitsu. But with that, those ice cycles, those cold water cycles, and then going through, I wonder if the blood not being viscous and allowing for oxygen and offloading carbon dioxide easier through the alveolar membranes allows for a more potent VO2 max while you're exerting, and then getting back in and having that vasoconstriction and forcing out lactic acid from the periphery. And I was talking to Amanda too. I was like, after about 2 or 3 cycles in the ice, I have to stop my workout and go pee. So I know I'm flushing lymphatics.
Yep.
I know that I'm doing that, and it's wild. And the few people that have accepted the challenge, my boys do it with me. They think it's fun.
How old?
My 17-year-old and my 15-year-old.
All right.
And my youngest one, he just likes to get his friends from the neighborhood to come over and jump in the cold water, and they'll stare at each other very intensely to see who's going to be the chicken first. And
It's great.
it's great. It's
what they do.
very machismo, and I love it because it's a very juvenile way to introduce his friends into something that he sees his dad do, and I take some pride in that. But the boys do that same workout with me, and it is. I invite anybody that has a cold water therapy device to move some workout equipment next to it and cycle in and out and in and out if you don't have any pre-existing.
It sounds exhausting.
It's not, though. Afterwards, I'm totally energized.
You have a lot of energy.
I'll do that sometimes, and then I'll go to jiu-jitsu. And I mean, I drink a lot of coffee, but not that much coffee.
How do you sleep?
Fantastic.
Yeah?
Every
You track
night.
your sleep?
I do track my sleep. I have a Whoop. I track my sleep often, and also I did notice a difference. I have grounding sheets. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure. The only thing that I remember, and I haven't slept without them. Well, last night we slept without them. There's no grounding sheets on that bed that we were on last night at my mom's house. When I first got the grounding sheets, I had really vivid dreams for about a week and a half. It was weird. And then it stopped, and I just slept good. But I do track my sleep, and I do notice that if I don't go in cold water for a day or two just because of work or just having a busy life. It's not something every day I'd like to be able to, but maybe not every day I can fit it in just because I got stuff going on. And I know 3 minutes sounds like nothing, but sometimes it's a lot when you got 3 kids and 3 different practices to go to or whatever your schedule's like. But I do notice that if I don't get the cold water in throughout the day, I'll be more restless at night. And I do track the ice baths when I go on my Whoop, and I'll put it in there in the time that I did it, so it's stacked in there. And it's a very intuitive, obviously data in, data out, but the analytics as to, it'll give you a report every month that says this behavior increased your sleep or this behavior decreased your sleep. So for example, you have alcohol consumption or a meal close to bedtime is one of those selections that you can put in there every day. It asks you like this little questionnaire. What did you do yesterday? Did you see natural light upon waking? Were you on your phone 15 minutes before bed? Ask you all these weird questions. Did you ice bath? Did you sauna? Did you ground? And those are all on there. And I noticed that me answering those questions, and then a month later, it's like, we noticed that you had like a 27% decrease in your deep sleep if you did an ice bath. And that's what it told me. So I was like, well, clearly I know I need to do it more. So it was just telling me something I already knew.
You've been monitoring your heart rate when you're in the ice bath too. Tell me about what you're seeing there.
I notice, okay, going back to the grounding, I do not get as deep of a dive in bradycardic change from the sauna buildup. Typically is where I'm tracking this in contrast therapy, getting my heart rate up pretty high in 150s, 160s territory, really uncomfortable to the point.
Exclusively from the sauna?
Yes, I haven't tracked it doing a workout.
Okay.
But just with the sauna seems to be the easiest way to get horribly uncomfortable. Right? Everybody can agree that a super hot sauna for a long period of time invokes a little bit of a panic. Like, I need to get out of here. Like, I'm cooking. And go out and go right into a cold water tub, or I'll go right into the Morozko, and looking at the graphs of the breakover and the subsequent dip
in your heart rate.
And my heart rate is much steeper. The dive is much steeper in a grounded cold plunge. And so to touch on that, but I mean, I'll have drops of 100 beats per minute within, you know, like whatever the range is from start to finish. But I mean, that's a huge dive.
Okay, so you might be at 150 in the sauna and go down to 50?
50 or
when you're
40 or 33 is the lowest I've ever gotten.
You've gone down to 33 beats per minute as your heart rate in a cold plunge.
Yes.
That's remarkable.
I didn't die. I'm here.
You're here.
Yeah, I didn't die.
Right. And then when you came out, you kept monitoring?
I did, and I went right back into the sauna, got a drink of water, went right back into the sauna to build back up and practice that contrast therapy on the regular.
I've posted about the mammalian dive reflex.
Yes.
And it's not something that happens when you're in the shower or when you're doing the cold pressure test. It's not something that happens with partial body cold water immersion. But when you go all the way up to, say, your clavicles, your armpits, I go all the way up to my jawline, you know. Now, your body has no choice but to prepare itself to dive. It thinks you're going in. You're going to go get lobster or gather mussels, or maybe you're going to do spear fishing or something like your ancient ancestors would have done. The heart rate goes down, even though, and this is counterintuitive, the metabolism is going up. You can get a continuous ketone monitor, and you can see how much fat burning increases as a result. I mean, it's showing, hey, there's more ketones in your bloodstream, and that's part of the fat metabolism. So you know metabolism is going up, and yet heart rate is going down. Breathing will slow, your brain will go into a more meditative state, and all of these are designed to allow you to dive for however long you need to go down there so you can go find dinner. It's paradoxical how one part of you feels like fight or flight, you get the adrenaline rush, your liver increases your blood glucose levels by releasing glycogen into your bloodstream.
Gluconeogenesis.
Yeah, and it's saying, we don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be rough, and we have to prepare this body for a fight. But it takes about 30, 45 seconds, I've noticed, for your body to switch, or maybe it's your brain or your psychology that switches, that says, all right, there's not going to be a fight. We're going to slow the breathing down. We're going to structure that response. We're going to get meditative. We're going to slow down the production of carbon dioxide in the bloodstream so that we can do whatever else is going on here. And
it takes a little bit of discipline to get yourself to realize that you're, at least in the immediate exposure to the cold, to stop that uncontrollable panting that we all have to then, be present, be mindful. It helps me to go underneath the water first thing.
I do that too.
I have to, and clearly I don't have a beautiful long locks that I'm worried about having to blow dry and or flat iron out afterwards. But with that, it helps me to realize quickly that or at least maybe trick my body into realizing quickly that I'm not going to die right now. But I think the mammalian dive reflex is super important because into which that activates the brown fat to keep you warm in the core and cold on the outside. And metabolic rate is measured in phosphorylation. How quick we're able to reattach phosphorus from ADP to ATP. Not necessarily oxygen consumption, where people relate a dive reflex to holding your breath. Yes, you do hold your breath, but while your metabolic rate is up and you are using glucose and oxygen in the mitochondria to rephosphorylize, you're getting on a healthy individual, whether it's a 36-to-1 production rate for one glucose molecule and one oxygen molecule to create 36. So that means for every one I get to spend 35. So I'm able to then conduct cellular activity and organ function and other things while I'm, as your example, underwater gathering lobster, doing things. I can continue to function without having to take another breath for a few minutes. So I think oxygen respiration versus, I'm saying this wrong, ventilation, which we think of holding our breath, versus cellular respiration and your metabolic rate are two different things that I think the correlation between the two is not really well understood, aside from people not having brain injuries after being in water for 45 or 65 minutes and being successfully resuscitated once they fall through the ice in the lake, and they just go, oh, well, it's the mammalian dive reflex protected him.
Do you have a protocol for that call when somebody's falling through in the ice?
As a matter of fact, well, I mean, maybe not the ice, because it gets cold where we're at, but cold water drownings, and that's anything. I mean, we don't carry a water like thermometer around, but any tepid body of water, we resuscitate unless they've been submerged, and you have to have verifiable data or evidence that they've been submerged more than 60 minutes. So if somebody's in water, we pull them out and we resuscitate them. Why? Because the mammalian dive reflex protects you and allows your body to continue to produce through gluconeogenesis, through secretion of glycogen from the liver, and produce more adenosine triphosphate through the process of phosphorylation, even in a state of anoxia. Okay,
so you're talking about resuscitating someone, no pulse,
no
breath,
breathing,
no sign of life.
That's the worst possible. You put them on the cardiac monitor, and they're going to be apneic and pulseless and unresponsive.
What does resuscitation look like?
Like when they come back?
No, it sounds like CPR. You're trying to get water out of their lungs if it's there. You're trying to.
Well, there's dry and wet drowning, so that's going to depend. And you're going to use our stethoscope and listen to lung sounds once we've placed either a basic or an advanced airway. Defibrillation may or may not be an option depending on their baseline cardiac rhythm or the cardiotonic medication that we give them, in a hopes of putting them into a rhythm that can then be corrected by electricity, or stimulate the mechanical side of the heart to then start beating on its own, hopefully in an organized fashion. But resuscitation in the field, while TV makes it seem sexy, is very basic. We are giving a set schedule of drugs that's afforded to us through medical control, and there's some protocols that go in place, and like you said, things matter, and so does the order. So we're going to do the basics before the advanced things, and then we're going to move on, starting an IV, giving medications, doing chest compressions, rotating people, doing chest compressions every preferably 2 minutes. The hospital and other areas that are resource rich have more people to cycle through, but when it's just you and your partner in an ambulance, or maybe a fire truck in an ambulance, there's only so many people to do X amount of jobs. It's a chaotic, beautiful concert of individuals trying to bring someone back to the present. They're not with us anymore, and I think everybody's looked or had the opportunity to go to a funeral, whether it was a difficult one for a close loved one, or maybe you were a kid and the only funeral you've ever been to was for an uncle you never met, and you go to the viewing. But I think everybody, even kids and adults alike, and loved one or not, can attest that once that person's energy, speaking of grounding, has left the body and gone somewhere, that's just a shell. Sometimes on resuscitations you can tell, like, this is just a shell. There's no energy left. Or you'll have this feeling amongst your group, like, this person's still here. We should try harder. We're going to keep going and do more heroic efforts to try and resuscitate them. I think that vibe, that energy that is in that individual, call it a soul or whatever you want to call it, is real. And I mean, if you think about, the conservation of mass energy and all these other ideas or theories that go with it, energy can't be created or destroyed. It only changes form. So where does it go? those are all those questions going on. And we've resuscitated people successfully. Matter of fact, we just had a gentleman come to the fire station and bring us dinner and sat down with us. We resuscitated him, and he was very, very thankful. He was pulseless and apneic. He had a work-related episode, some type of cardiac event, and we brought him back to life. And that was the first time I ever had somebody come and knock on the fire station door, like, "Hey, you saved my life," and give me a hug. I didn't know what to say. It was a beautiful experience. My crew, we took pictures with him, and my fire department made a little video about his experience being resuscitated, and but he still had the energy in him. I felt that like this wasn't I hate to say a lost cause, because we're going to give everybody that chance, but you can tell the difference between somebody who's still there, or maybe they've gone to wherever it is we go. And I think we all argue over how to get there, and that's the root over the human condition, you know, whether you're X religion or Y religion or whatever. Like, we all agree there's something beyond this.
It's a matter of faith.
We just fight over how we're supposed to get there, and I think that's stupid.
I talked to an emergency room physician. She worked in Baltimore for decades. She said her rule was 24 hours on a cold water drowning.
24 hours.
They're not dead. She says people have showed up in her hospital and been resuscitated. For me, it's like brought back to life, you know, because I don't work in the medical field. But she says you cannot give up on a cold water drowning, because it's not a coma exactly. Like, there are no signs of life, but she goes, 24 hours, she's brought people back. So there's no bright line. I mean, I think she mentioned with kids, now, she didn't say it's easier, but they have a longer sort of window through which they can be brought back. And I think there are even more extreme cases than that. There is something about the cold that preserves the brain from hypoxic injury when there's no pulse, there's no blood flow, there's no oxygen going anywhere. But instead of immediately descending into a state of decay, there is something about the cold that is keeping things at a state of stasis until life can be restored.
Like something futuristic, like a cryosleep or something for interstellar travel,
sort of
or
imagine,
something to something like that.
Yeah.
But 24 hours seems like a long time.
Now you got me thinking about putting a Morozko in space. I should talk to Musk.
But getting into managed care and allopathic medicine and the industrial complex of medicine, and with all that, like, there's a lot of things that are just, they don't feel right sometimes. And we are supposed to be outside in the forest, barefoot, swimming for lobsters, doing all those things, and we've removed ourselves through convenience, and it's a slow, painful death otherwise. Like,
I build machines. I'm an engineer. I don't really understand what happens inside the body as well as I understand what's happening inside the machine. We are not going back to teepees and caves. We're going to live in this technological world. We're not ready to give up our heated leather seats and everything else that makes our lives comfortable. The downside is now we have to seek discomfort. We have to bring it intentionally into our lives, because all of the technologies that engineering has given us have made it so easy to just sort of live like a sloth. That's okay. We can create machines that will replace what has been subtracted from our natural environment when we can't get out into the natural environment. So far for me, this is the ice bath and this is the green light.
It's the second best thing to nature.
Exactly right. It's like a marketing tagline right there.
And I mean, it's the closest thing you're gonna get, in my experience, to jumping in the river with my kids. And I mean, one of our most favorite things to do is go to Big Five or some sporting goods store and get a pair of new goggles for the season, or a mask, and we're gonna go find a good swimming hole and
what's coming.
Go see what kind of treasure's down there. And the water's freezing and the earth is there, and we're barefoot in the sunshine where we're supposed to be. But to touch on your the machine, human body, any animal, we're just meat machines.
You know, I think we're a lot more complex than machines.
No. We're a system of articulating organs and tissue working together to accomplish a task. And yeah, while we're sentient and we're conscious and we have all of these other things, you know, like feelings, wants, needs, reflexes, and what's the word I'm thinking of escapes me, it'll come back, but at the basic fundamental thing, like I look at the human body as a machine. It is a meat machine. And if this system is not working right, what other systems is it going to affect? So for me in paramedic school, it made sense to me being, you know, auto shop, metal shop, wood shop kind of high school guy, liking all these turning wrenches and building things and stuff. When I went into anatomy and physiology and they're talking about the acromion process and the femoral acetabellum and all these, like, you know, anatomical structures I had to memorize, I was like, torque wrench, screwdriver, okay, this is just a machine and these are the parts of the machine. And I had to conceptualize it in a way that made sense. And I kept telling myself, it's just a meat machine. It's just a meat machine. It's just a meat machine, because that's how my brain works. So when I say that, I don't mean to make it like sound pejorative. No, we're not androids or machines or autonomous things without, you know, a conscious drive or any of the like. But to me, that's how I like to look at the human body, is that, well, I can fix a machine. Mm-hmm. So I like to try and think maybe I can fix people, at least in the short amount of time that and not in a sense of psychological. Like, there's no Freudian here to that. It's like resuscitating, what we talked about, you know, or helping them through some type of crisis, you know, whether it's, you know, a medical, traumatic, or psychological emergency into which we're called to. Now, I mean, Aaron does a lot of different things in the CVICU and keeping people alive. Like when my measures fail, that's where they go once they are resuscitated or on the borderline of not being resuscitatable. They go and she and her team deal with that stuff.
You told me you were the delivery man.
Yep, just a fancy Uber. That's it. A lot of the times the ambulance is indeed, sometimes you get to the point to where your scope of practice limits what you can do. I've reached the end of what I can do for you, even with online medical control, calling doctors, getting orders for different medications that may be considered exotic or rarely used in a circumstance that maybe skirts the fringes of what their normal application is in this you know, course. Instead of emergency, you get on the phone with the doctor, hey, I want to do X, Y, and Z, it's within my scope of practice. But that scope of practice is still limited in the field, even for an advanced life support provider. That's why we go to the hospital. We don't leave you in your home like, oh, paramedics came and they started an IV and okay, we're gone. No, you need to go to a higher level of care, and that's where you meet the emergency room team, and then they transfer up into the ICU or cardiovascular ICU, and our talk of a resuscitation there, you know, somebody with a heart that's not pumping or working properly for a myriad of different reasons, and then they're able to then carry them through. Those situations usually will kind of segue into managed care now, because this person that was resuscitated might need some type of very specific medication for their circumstance for the rest of their life. Now, I think in contrast, most of the things that we're dealing with in modern society, it makes me think like no food, one problem, lots of food, lots of problems. Like, we have a lot of issues that aren't very specific, like what I just talked about. A person that was resuscitated that now needs managed care for some type of cardiovascular infarct or insult or whatever the case may be. That's very niche, that person. And while they're not alone, and there's a lot of people that have those issues, we have on the other side of things a bunch of people that are not seeking discomfort, not exerting themselves, making poor habitual, often, don't get me wrong, I like a cheeseburger and a beer just like the next guy. But if you do a cheeseburger and a beer every day and just watch Netflix...
What's wrong with a cheeseburger?
Nothing's wrong with a cheeseburger. It's delicious. But if you do it all the time, and you're eating ultra-processed foods and you're expecting a pill to make it go away, you're never going to fix it. If you don't go outside, you don't get in the forest, you don't invest the time in yourself, you don't seek the discomfort, you don't put yourself in a situation psychologically, physically, and metabolically to better yourself, there's a lot of habituation that comes with, I think, the people that are willing to put themselves into an ice bath. That comes along with those benefits. So
thank you for coming down.
Thank you, sir.
It's been great having you on the couch.